Thank you so much, Hunter. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. Now, tell me, how do you pronounce your last name? I want to make sure I got that right.
Sure. Thank you for asking. Fennell.
It is Fennell. Okay, great.
Yes, you got it right.
Yay, it's great to start. And how about your company? Did I get that close?
Athari Collective. Yes,
Oh
Athari
my
actually means,
gosh, this is going to be great,
I know
Samantha.
you've,
We're
you've
off
gotten a
to a good
thousand.
start. And where are you calling in from today?
From New York City. I'm in Kips Bay on 28th Street here in New York, and it's a beautiful sunny day. I'm actually in my home today.
Oh, fantastic. I'm just across the river there over in Astoria, Queens.
Okay, so you have the same sunshine. That's great.
I do. It is a beautiful day today. So let's jump right in. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself, how, before we jump into the topic of human-centered selling, can you tell me a little bit about your career journey, what got you to Athari, and why this topic is, a passion and part of your work now?
Sure. It's interesting because I've always been in sales, like even before college. I was in B2C sales, doing retail. And then right after college, got introduced to the world of magazine publishing and advertising sales, and grew through, I guess, 10 or 15 years on that track, from Rolling Stone to Vibe magazine, which I launched, to 8 years at Condé Nast, to being associate publisher of Elle, and having increasing responsibility, but also increasing experience in really honing my skills on how best to communicate with the actual customer or clients that we were servicing. And so Athari Collective, which is my consultancy, which I launched a couple of years ago, really focuses on creating social impact strategies and inclusive marketing for brands and businesses that are future focused and realize that the world looks a lot different than it did 10, 20, 30 years ago, and just need a little bit of help on how to navigate that and really become a future-proofed company. So my role at Athari Collective, in addition to being founder, is also heading up growth and customer relationships. And so all of my sales background, 20 plus years of it, I'm now harnessing to grow our consultancy.
Fantastic. Congratulations. Thank you for
Thank
sharing
you.
that as well. And yeah, 10, 20 years ago, things looked wildly different. And even 5 years ago, I would say things look wildly different as well. So can you talk to me about what does this term mean to you, human-centered selling, and why is it more important than ever now?
Sure. Human-centered selling is really the idea of humanizing B2B experiences in a digital world. And while I've always taken a human approach to my sales efforts, I think the tactics are completely different than they were just even 3 years ago. We know B2B relationships are inherently complex, yet B2B sales is really at the end of the day all about people and humans, and how to create rapport, create trust, and not treat them just as prospects or a means to make your number, but really be in partnership with them in order to help them achieve their goals. So I think really it's only when you can understand people's lived experiences and really understand their needs that you can earn their trust and then develop the right solutions to address their problems. But it also means, especially in this day and age, and I'm sure you'll hear this a lot in the course of the next 2 days, it also means interacting from a place of empathy, right? Showing interest in their lives, understanding where their concerns are, really knowing, what's going on in the times that we're living in. If they're at a company that just experienced layoffs, that's probably burning on their mind, feel free to bring that up, talk about it, do your research and know, what the concerns are, conditions are in their company, but really lead with that. And it's a great way to really start to build rapport and connection.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I love that you touched on bringing empathy to what you do, because without that, it yes, we're talking about sales, but there's more than just the transaction at place, right?
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
and we are all just people
At the end of the day.
at the end of the day. That's right, at the end of the day. And I also I love that what I was inferring to what I heard there is, do your research and ask questions. And I want to encourage our listeners today. Y'all can also ask questions, so feel free to drop them in the chat. And with Samantha or any of our speakers throughout the day, know that that is available. This is an interactive experience. These professionals are here to answer your questions as well. So I will pepper those in. So feel free to drop them in. So Samantha, can you speak to what are some of the challenges that are faced now that are, when we're selling through the screens now, you and I are on a screen right now versus face to face, like you were saying, like even just 3 years ago, it was probably a wildly different experience than it is now. Not only has it been normalized on so many fronts, but I think just for most people, we're used to being on calls now. So how is it
Right.
different on both sides of what's going on?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting. And we as sellers really need to align with the changing ways that buyers and our customers, and clients want to engage. And I was reading through some recent Deloitte research, which really kind of blew me away. And I think it's a great lesson for all of us on the sales side. The study found, this was done in late 2021, it found that only 29% of B2B buyers right now really wanted a face-to-face interaction in the sales process, while almost 50% of the sellers that they spoke to and surveyed thought that in-person was really the only way to connect with the consumer, right? So there's this interesting disconnect between the buy side and the sale side. But I think it's really important to meet the person, your potential buyer, at the level of communication that best fits their needs. That's super important. And then also, know that we need to develop new ways to build relationships that align with how buyers want to buy. It's fine to want to sell the way you want to sell, the way you always did, but the world has changed, likely forever. Deloitte also reported that they anticipate by 2025, 80% of all B2B sales will be remote or virtual, which is kind of terrifying, but the point is we're not going back to the way things were. So even if it strays from how things have been done before, we as sellers really need to hone our skills and practices for how to not lose that connection with our customers.
So important. We can get into how we can do some of those skills, but before we do, that is so fascinating that we're going from 50% and then 80% in a few years. And it totally makes sense. I do so much virtually now. I have appointments, I have meetings, I have all these things. And it's like, great, I don't have to leave my apartment. I can schedule my day accordingly. There's no commute, so I can see how this is like really, there's so many benefits to it, but it's a completely different way of interacting, I imagine, with folks. And I love too, what you're saying is like, we got to meet them where they are.
Yeah, and again, we can't force the old way in the new world. And one of the core challenges I think that sellers experience, and I don't think I know, is not being able to read the room and the fear that you're going to miss the nonverbal cues. You're not going to be able to build rapport because you're not in a 3D world.
Right.
And it is true that they say anywhere from 70 to 93% of all communication is nonverbal. So without a doubt, when you are not physically in front of someone, you're not going to see that they're tapping their foot on the floor, or they're maybe took that slightly audible sigh, or they're sneaking a peek at their watch. So all these things matter, and the habit is that when you are in the room, you're making instantaneous decisions on how to calibrate your sales call, your meeting, based on the verbal and the nonverbal cues. So you have the ability to read the room, and a lot of that goes away when we're on screens.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're continually like putting ourselves on mute. We hop off camera for a moment. So there's all of these ways that I think we've all kind of learned on both sides to like take care of ourselves, but that's valuable data from a salesperson
Right.
that's gone suddenly. So what are some of the ways that you can, I think one thing that you were speaking to earlier about empathy, and asking questions, that's active listening, right? So
Right.
how can sales reps demonstrate active listening and build rapport with clients and customers on Zoom calls? Because we're not getting that information on Zoom. If two people talk at once, Zoom like changes the volume. There's so many technical things that are different now. How do we still engage with folks and do that active listening in this 2D space?
Sure. I think when it comes down to building rapport, whether it's on or offline, a key component of building rapport, some would say the most important, is establishing what we have in common. And that, again, can be challenging when you're looking at someone on a small screen. So if it's a new prospect or a brand new client or a customer, take advantage of what you can get out of the frame. So, take cues from what's in their environment, assuming that they don't have a virtual background. Is there, alma mater memorabilia on the wall? Engage them on, my sister went to a Big Ten school too. Or, if they have a huge wall of books behind them, ask them who their favorite nonfiction writer is. There's ways to kind of engage and interact beyond the sales agenda that can help to start to create commonality and therefore build rapport. I'd also say, and this kind of predates the last 3 years, but the importance of doing your research and finding kind of clues into who this customer is really important. It's something that I don't know the statistics, but I venture to guess 4 out of 5 salespeople don't spend enough time doing with social media, with podcasts, with posts on LinkedIn. Take 5 minutes before that call and see if there's any information that you can extract to then share, create an opportunity to offer a compliment, a genuine, substantive compliment. I'm not talking about telling them you like their purple blouse, but, it shows that you've done your homework, that you are engaged, that you've prepared for the call, and that you truly want to create some level of intimacy with that person on that call.
I love that. Yeah, I'm cheating right now because I have a blurred background, but I was like, oh, I can see you have coffee table books and there's picture frame there. Oh, family might be important. We can talk about that. Like
Exactly.
there's data there, right? You have
Yeah.
great modern taste.
Well, thank you. Yes,
Oh,
and
you're so welcome.
I chose this corner strategically to exemplify my point.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what coffee table books do you got going on there?
Oh my goodness. Let's see. We've got Magritte. We've got Dominique Ansel. I have a lot of
Yes.
coffee table books all around the house, but
Oh,
again, it's can just be a nice way to break the ice, right?
I love that. We could talk about art. I have paintings all over my house. I like to support local artists, so I buy art from my friends. Yeah.
Wonderful. I love that.
Yeah. So it's a great way, that I love that. There is available stuff, information, even in this 2D world. I think that's really, really important for to be able to build that rapport. Cause we let our guard down, right? And we can just like we said, at the end of the day, we're just people and we can like relax for a second, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So what are some of the best practices and things to watch out for in this new landscape?
Sure. I think, active listening is really key. And it's challenging, as you mentioned before, with Zoom, which automatically will adjust volume if 2 people or 3 people start talking. But I think one of the best things you can do is to stay in dialogue with who you're speaking to. And of course, if the dynamic is one-on-one versus a group meeting, that changes. But oftentimes when we're on these calls, people are just sitting there nodding and staring and waiting for their turn to speak. And so you lose that kind of natural serendipitous flow of conversation, which again builds rapport and creates human connection. So that's one. I think also going back to the empathy point, showing that you care how others are feeling. And if they give you a fine, okay, let that be. But it's important to be cognizant of the times that we're living in. So, a year ago, every conversation started with, something to do with COVID. Now we're talking about the unfortunate circumstances of layoffs in so many of the tech companies and other companies. So, give some space and hold space for the person that you're talking to kind of express any sort of emotions or feelings about that. Not to start every meeting on a down note, but it's really important, I think, for the person that you're speaking to just to understand that you do have, the empathy and the concern to ask those questions. I also think bringing energy, my goodness, so many people you will call on virtually have been on calls all day long. They're bleary-eyed. They're like, okay, I got another call. I think the onus is on the salesperson to bring the energy to the quote unquote room, right? Zoom fatigue is real. And sellers have to bring a little bit of sizzle to the table. And then, the thing everyone loves to talk about, eye contact versus no eye contact. It's very hard unless you are a newscaster or a trained actor to stare at that little dot on your computer. So I find it, intermittent eye contact, because psychologically we're just built to connect through our eyes, even if it's virtual, is important, right? So whatever feels natural, but not to stare at the center of your screen the entire call would probably be a good idea. And then if possible, keep the meeting, especially if it's a long meeting, visually dynamic. So, if there's an opportunity to incorporate screens, shares, props, pictures, something to kind of break up the monotony of that hour and 90-minute meeting, a break in the visual focus can really kind of help to bring a little bit more energy to the room, so to speak.
It's all very theatrical in a way.
It is actually, right? I mean, we've all been on Zoom calls that just felt like you're going to the dentist, and then other ones that were like, oh, that was actually kind of fun. And a lot of it is the content, but a lot of it also is the delivery and the energy that's kind of brought to the meeting.
Yeah, the energy is so important, and all the tips that you just mentioned do take practice, right? They take this awareness that you're speaking of, it's because that little green dot, like it's a bizarre trick of the eye where it's like, I want to look at your eyes on the screen,
right?
But in order to have eye contact, I have to look right here. So it's this back and forth, not all of us can have a teleprompter with you behind the camera. Like that's how the telecasters do it, when they're on the video call, they're like right there. So it's a different world for us. We have to like play these strategies, that you're speaking of.
Mm-hmm.
So I love all of these tips. We actually got a question from someone in the audience, so I'm going to pitch you one of those.
Okay.
So Kat asked, do you have any tips specifically for outbound sales outreach? A cold email campaign doesn't bring across a lot of warmth. Any tips?
I actually do. And I was just thinking about this a few days ago in ways to break through. And I think, for outbound, personalization is really important, because if you are reaching out via email, your potential customer or client is getting a bajillion of those. And, open rates are probably at an all-time low. There's spam blockers and all sorts of things that are getting in your way, right? So one thing that I like, and I'm actually pretty new to it still, is video messaging tools, right? So tools like Loom is one, and there's another one called BombBomb, where you don't need any special technology. You can create a video message that can be great for outbound. If they're opening that email, they will be compelled to click on the video. And then you have your 5, 10, 15 seconds to say hello. I wouldn't go into a heavy sales pitch with the first point of contact, but it's a great way to break through. And it's entertaining. It's also good technology for walking your clients, once you have them, through proposals. So not everything has to be a Zoom meeting. You can actually cut down on Zoom meetings and then be able to highlight what you want them to focus on during walking through a proposal, for example. And then one of the benefits of that is they can actually take in that content in their own time and then provide feedback to you again in their own time. So just a couple of ideas on how to break through, especially with cold outreach.
Those are really good tips. And actually, I've done some of those myself here at Power to Fly. You know, when we have these summits, I essentially made like little commercials for upcoming things to be like, hey, I'm Hunter and we have this thing coming up. I hope you join us, you know, and it was part of our email. And surprise, surprise, we saw the numbers go up, you know, and it's interesting because it's this personal connection. People are like, oh, you know, I think also, I don't know, maybe what's your hot take on this? I feel like with like Instagram and TikTok, we're kind of used to getting these little bite-sized videos now of a way to digest something. And I can do it, you know, I'm guilty of multitasking. I can like kind of have something playing or like a podcast and me writing an email. And I'm like, oh, I should go listen to that, or I should go do that. Oh, do you think that has maybe some influence on this effectiveness?
I do, because we're now socialized to take in, you know, little snackable content from
I love that snackable content.
I didn't coin that phrase, but you can still borrow it.
Okay, I'll keep it on loan for now. Yeah. That's great. I see this whole like, you know, this whole platter of entrees and appetizers of, oh, I'm just going to have a little bit of Power to Fly, a little bit of Samantha Fennell strategy, you know, all these little things. So we have just about 5 minutes left, you know. I would love to hear, you know, just to kind of go back before we wrap up with some of our last questions, you know, in you mentioned some of your inclusive marketing strategies. Can you speak to some of that? I would just love our listeners, and for myself, I would just love to hear some of that work that you've been doing, and maybe some like, what does that mean? How did you do that? Something maybe that's like a strategy that you were proud of in that way or with clients?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. So this year we started working with a pretty prominent museum in Connecticut. And it was interesting because they are really a legacy institution. They have a museum that was housed in a mansion that's almost 100 years old. But they're building a 45,000 square foot new building right next door. And they realized that this was an opportunity for them to kind of reset and also open their doors to communities that had never been to the Bruce, or it's called the Bruce, by the way, or had never been to the Bruce, had never really felt welcome there. So when we first started working with them, it was a pretty straightforward marketing strategy and plan assignment. But when we really dove deeper into what their mission statement was, they truly wanted to be an institution for all, for arts and science, for art and science. So we really took hold of that. And what we created was a multi-pronged marketing strategy that really reached into their neighboring communities, communities that are of color, communities that maybe are different socioeconomic backgrounds, with people of different socioeconomic backgrounds, and then really through leaning heavily into community partnerships, reaching into the communities, as opposed to just flinging open the doors and saying, we're open, you know, come on by. So there's programming in place. They open in about 4 months. There's programming in place that really aligns with an inclusive strategy that builds relationship with new communities, and that will ultimately create opportunity for them to build their membership and really be a force for good in the area, in the community.
That's fantastic. Congratulations on that project, and thank you for sharing about that. I
Sure.
love hearing these real life examples of what's going on right now, and it's so wonderful to hear what you're doing. I think it's inspiring. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So in these last couple minutes here, can you talk about some of, maybe some tips for friends listening in? What are some of the out of the box tactics that sales reps could use to break through in this era of Zoom gloom? We talked about, sort of the theatricality of keeping the frame interesting and keeping those presentations alive. But is there anything else that you could impart with us?
I think anything that is not typical to really break through can be a great benefit. So we talked about, creating these videos. I think, again, coming down to personalization, what's going to make that, the end recipient feel heard, seen, special. One tactic that we love, and I talk to my ad agency friends all the time, and they want more of this, are virtual lunch and learns, where instead of everybody kind of piling into a conference room and eating out of the same platters of food, because most of the agencies right now are still more or less hybrid, some are completely remote, creating an opportunity to have customized meals going straight to all the attendees. And people love this because they feel like they're in community virtually. They get something that's, special and unique that they've chosen. And of course, it's a benefit to the sellers because, you've got them, in the room, virtual or otherwise. And it's just a great way to engage. And, I can tell you, we never did that 3 years ago. But all these amazing businesses are popping up to support, the new reality that we're in today.
That is such a cool idea. I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Samantha, we are out of time, unfortunately. So please tell us, how can we stay connected with you and anything we should follow, listen to coming up for you?
Sure. Well, I'm quite reachable on LinkedIn, Samantha Fennell, and Athari Collective. We have 2 LinkedIn pages, and then also on Instagram, Sam Fennell 99. I read my DMs every day. And I'm happy to answer any questions or any follow-ups that anybody in the audience would like to talk about. I'm here to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Samantha Fennell. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Enjoy your sunny, freezing New York day.
I know it's cold.
Stay warm and have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
day. Thank you for making
Thank
the
you,
time.
Hunter.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Samantha.